Welcome to the John Cady podcast. I'm John Cady, U.S. Navy retired, former minister, and a man who's seen and experienced a lot of things. In this episode, I'm going to piggyback on a broadcast I heard tonight from Professor of Rock. He talked about artists who became cautionary tales of how quickly a star can rise and also come crashing and burning. There is no one artist who exemplifies or illustrates that picture of a star rising fast, burning bright, and then come crashing down in flames than Paul Gadd, better known as Gary Glitter. Gary Glitter used to be a staple of British radio. He was not just known for Rock and Roll Part 2, which everybody's familiar with. It used to be played at sports stadiums around the world, including here in the U.S. Of course, because of the association with Glitter's crimes and current imprisonment, everybody wants to just stay away from it. They don't want to play it. They don't have anything to do with it because of the association. Understandable. But to start off, Gary Glitter was not a one-hit wonder in the U.S. He actually had 2 top 40 hits in the U.S. Of course, there was Rock and Roll Part 2, which hit number 7 here, as well as number 2 in the U.K. Also hit number 1 in Australia and in France. His follow-up single, I Didn't Know I Loved You Till I Saw You Rock and Roll, a lesser-known song from his catalog, would hit number 35 in the U.S., so it was his second top 40 hit here. And it was a pretty decent hit around the world. Now, of course, it was touched on that Glitter would have 3 number 1 hits in the U.K., and those would be I'm the Leader of the Gang I Am, I Love You, Love Me, Love, and Always Yours. Do You Want to Touch Me, which was also covered by Joan Jett and Ian Lloyd. Ian Lloyd's version just simply never got off the ground. It was a limited release, or I should say limited airplay, simply because Ian Lloyd was not that well known. But Joan Jett, her star was on the rise, and her cover of Do You Want to Touch Me would hit the top 20 here in the U.S. In fact, it peaked at number 20, giving her her third top 40 hit by 1982. But it more than just the string of hits. And Glitter, while other glam rockers would see their star fade completely by the 1980s, he somehow managed to keep the game going. He kept the ball rolling. In the 1980s, he would have several top 40 hits, including the top 10 single Another Rock and Roll Christmas. It hit number 7 in the UK. And it was a staple on Christmas radio, both here and overseas, until his fall from grace. In fact, he even kept the ball rolling until the mid-1990s. So here was a guy who kept the glam and the glitter going for decades, whereas many of his peers were already faded into obscurity. He had the world in the palm of his hands. He was a regular guest presenter and musical guest on the British show Top of the Pops, which was the UK's version of American Bandstand. But what happened? Well, it was touched on tonight on Professor of Rock about what happened with the computer. Yes, I remember hearing about that when I was deployed. And I was very disappointed because this was a guy who was part of my teenage years. His music was fun. It was cool to listen to. I had copies of his records at home. And I was very disappointed to learn that he was involved in such nasty stuff involving children. I'll just leave it there. I don't want to be demonetized for it. But then as the years go by, you would think that he would have repented. But people who are of that mindset, who venture down that dark path, they don't repent. They don't change. Because what happened? He went to Vietnam. And again, to avoid demonetization, I won't mention what happened. But he got caught doing some nasty stuff there. He did almost 3 years in prison. And when he got out of prison, he was deported from Vietnam, sent back to the UK, and he was put on the registry. So, things were kind of low for a while. But in 2012, Glitter's name came up again, and this time it was again for more of the same nasty stuff. Except this time, it dated back decades. We're talking about 1970s, 1980s. It was known in the BBC that Gary Glitter was good friends with Jimmy Savile. Glitter's name was on the top of the list from an investigation known as Operation U-Tree. Operation U-Tree brought down several, including Glitter and also Australian-born music icon Rolf Harris, who basically faded out of the public light after his prison sentence was completed. Glitter was charged and ultimately convicted in 2015 of historical offenses. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison. I remember watching the sentence being handed down, and the judge looked at Glitter and told him that he wished he could have imposed a stiffer sentence on him, but he had to go with the sentencing guidelines based on the laws at the time these offenses were committed. Nonetheless, he was sentenced to 16 years behind bars. Now, one would think that now, he's hit. You would think that at this point, somebody like him would have finally hit rock bottom. He's in his 70s. His career is over. No one's going to listen to his music ever again. 8 years go by. 2023, he's out on early release. One would have thought that, okay, he's out on parole, that he could finally get his act together. Well, guess what? The news revealed that was wrong. Glitter violated terms of his parole. Again, I won't go into the specifics because I don't wish to be demonetized. But he violated his parole and was sent back to prison where he will serve out the rest of his sentence, which will end in 2031. It's been said that he will be under very strict surveillance and everything once he's out of prison. It's very sad because this was a man who was beloved and fondly remembered by many, not just in Great Britain, but across Europe, even here in America. But now, Rock and Roll Part 2, for the most part, it will never be played again anywhere. Radio stations won't play it. And even when some do, for like movie soundtracks and stuff, they get scrutinized because there is such a toxic association between the song and the performer. Gary Glitter's stench is all over everything. And even artists who cover his music have to it can be questioned, well, why do you cover his music? That's a valid question for another time. This is John Cady. Thank you for listening. Hit like, hit subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.